Rob Crisell here in the front is our speaker. Rob grew up in Fallbrook on actually a 3-acre avocado grove and earned his degree from Yale and his law degree from George Mason School of Law. So after a career in publishing, law, and commercial real estate, he's now a writer, an actor, a teacher, and as you've heard now, a winemaker from Temecula. So we're excited that he's here tonight. In addition to dozens of articles for Sunset, Highlights for Kids, Outside, and other magazines, he's written 5 books, including The Zoo of Impossible Animals. I want to see that one, Rob. Shakespeare's Book of Wisdom, which I think might now define the label out in front over here. It's so cool. And of course, the book that you guys are all here to hear about tonight, California Avocados, A Delicious History. Just a reminder, we will have those for sale, and Rob can sign them for you after the talk. As we've gotten to know Rob, we also found out that he actually did a TED Talk geared towards young people, how to not hate Shakespeare, and I love that. So without further ado, our winemaker and speaker for tonight, Rob Crisell, come on up.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming here, and thank you to Daisha. Thank you, Emily, for setting this up. I am not used to such professionalism. I just spoke at a Rotary Club in Fallbrook. It was somewhat less produced, let's put it that way. They said, you have 5 minutes, and then we have to begin the rest of the meeting, and I acted accordingly. I actually brought with me from Fallbrook 2 Fuerte avocados. So if you know anything about avocados, these are the OGs. These are the original gangster avocados. So I'm going to put one down here and one down here, and I guess whoever keeps the last one will get to keep it. So they're very small, these. It's early in the season, so pass it along. All right. Let's go back a little bit to my...
How do you ID which kind of avocado it is?
Well, it's difficult, and we'll talk about that. In fact, I already had someone come up to me, and he said he had an avocado in his hand, which is always the great fear of anybody like me who's supposed to know, and he says, what is this one? Now, the problem, as you might know about avocados, is like many fruits, it's heterozygous. And if you plant a seed in the ground, just like a person, a totally unique being is going to spring out of there. It could be completely unrelated to its parents. So that means that all avocados are asexually reproduced, but that's the least important part of our talk today. So, I was at the Fallbrook Historical Society. I am from Temecula, California. I don't get to come up here every time. Oh, good. Every time I do, I'm reminded why this is the most gorgeous area in the most gorgeous state in the most gorgeous country in the world. So congratulations. I mean, wow, so pretty. But I was going to speak for 30 minutes. I told the historian, I said, cut me off at 30 minutes because that's otherwise I get going. And an hour and a half later, my father, who still lives in Fallbrook, was doing this in the back row. So I am going to set my timer for 35 minutes. After that, I am going to open it up for questions because I think the questions are much more interesting than anything that I have to say. So I would like to mention a little bit of background here on me, although Daisha did a great job. I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I was in publishing, I went to law school and passed the bar and practiced law for about 5 minutes. I have a short attention span apparently, went into commercial real estate, and then went full circle about 15 years ago and started writing again. And I've since written 5 books, and I teach Shakespeare in the school as a visiting instructor primarily, and I did that talk on how not to hate Shakespeare. I hated Shakespeare throughout high school, throughout college even, and it wasn't until after college that I learned that the trick with Shakespeare is not to read Shakespeare. Shakespeare was not really meant to be read. Shakespeare was meant to be performed and acted. And so when that happens, wonderful things happen. So I teach my students, 3rd grade all the way up to 85 years old, I teach them through acting. They're acting for the most part. I like to start these talks with a little Shakespeare. So I had the honor of playing the friar in Romeo and Juliet on a couple different occasions in 2016 and 2022. And Friar Lawrence, as many of you know, is Shakespeare's great horticulturalist. He's a wonderful scientist. And he gives a speech at the beginning, well, when we meet him, probably second act, and he talks about the amazing properties of plants, stones, and animals, properly understood, and how these conflicting elements in life join together in this miraculous thing. And what he doesn't realize he's describing is the entire play. He's joining the opposites, Romeo and Juliet. He's trying to bring about peace from all this war, and out of death, what happens at the end of the play? Peace, love, and they never fight again. He didn't want it to happen that way, though. So I'd like to start with that a little bit. And I think in the context of the fires right now, and we're seeing nature and its very tragic and very fierce other side of nature combined with sometimes the best intentions of humans. Sometimes we get awful results, but I think great things will come out of it. The earth that's nature's mother is her tomb. What is her burying grave? That is her womb. And from her womb, children of diverse kind, we sucking on her natural bosom find. Many for many virtues excellent, none but for some, and yet all different. Oh, mickle is the powerful grace that lies in plants, stones, herbs, and their true qualities. For not so vile that on the earth doth live, but to the earth some special good doth give. Nor aught so good, but strained from that fair use, revolts from true nature, stumbling on abuse. Virtue itself turns vice, being misapplied, and vice, sometime by action, dignified. Within the infant rind of this weak flower, poison hath residence and medicine power. For this, being smelt, with that part cheers each part. Being tasted, slays all senses with the heart. Two such opposed kings encamp them still in man as well as herbs, grace and rude will. And where the latter is predominant, full soon the canker death eats up that plant. So, showing the duality, thank you. Showing the duality of nature both in avocados, which have a little trace poison, a little bit in the seed, which allowed those early megafauna to poop them out in different places, not chew them up, just a little bit. And of course, all that goodness and wonderful nutrient-dense meat around the seed. So there was the nice little translation, but too late for that. My book before this was a book called Temecula Valley Wineries. So I have liked wine for a long time, but like many of you, during COVID, I really doubled down. And we have 2.5 acres of wine grapes on my property, Syrah and Sangiovese. And I started to make wine because the wineries started not wanting to buy it. And so I was taken under my wing by that older gentleman in that photo. Our crusher destemmer broke. And so he said, Rob, he's 84 years old, we got to go up, wash our feet, and jump in. And so we did the whole I Love Lucy thing, jumping in there, crushing, while people took out the stems. And that was my Sangiovese, not the wine you had tonight. Just so you know. So I decided in doing all that to write some newspaper columns, and then I started to say, well, you know, there hasn't been a good history book written on the Temecula Valley wineries, which had been around since the late 60s. And so I wrote that along with a feature on each of the wineries down there. We are no Paso Robles, we're no Santa Barbara County wine, but we're getting there, and we have some interesting stuff if you've ever been. Anybody ever been to Temecula Winery? Oh, Temecula, oh, good, good. Oh, anybody connected with the avocado business in here? Any growers? Even if you're just amateur growers? Okay. One tree. I have a tree. One tree. Everybody's got their tree. So someone asked about the Pinot Noir that you're having tonight. In 2022, my father, who's 82, he and I had a connection with somebody who had some Pinot grapes in Santa Rita Hills. So I zipped up here, bought a ton, brought it back, and made it in Temecula. And unfortunately, if you know anything about winemaking, it was about 22 bricks. It was 22, year 2022, they didn't quite get to the fruitiness that I wanted. You might have noticed that. It's not a rather austere Pinot Noir, but I'm proud of it. And on the cover, the bottle, you see a picture of Arado, the muse of poetry, because I write poems and I teach poetry, and it's supposed to put you in a state of reverie, so I called it Reverie. It does not put you in a state of reverie. Spoiler alert. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my adventures in avocados. What I'm going to do is I have a lot of slides here. I'm going to touch very lightly on these slides so I don't go the whole hour and a half like I did last time. There are so many rabbit holes. I spent a year researching this at using the archives provided by the California Avocado Society at the Huntington Library, but also they had 11,000 pages of their annual yearbook. People who love avocados, and maybe some of you are out there, are obsessed with avocados. And the founders of the avocado industry were prime examples. And they created a very extensive yearbook starting from 1915, and they never missed a year. And it still continues today, and I just went to the 109th meeting of the Avocado Society out in Pala, California. So I'd like to start, I'm mostly going to be improvising on the slides, answering your questions, but I'd like to read from the intro, my book's intro, and it kind of will help explain why I wrote this book. I start off every chapter with a quote, a historical quote, of course. An unripe avocado is of small charm to the palate, but a ripe one lives long in the memory of delicious flavors. That's from the first meeting of the California Avocado Association in 1915 in Los Angeles, California. So I grew up in the heart of a 3-acre Fuerte Grove in Fallbrook, California, a town in northern San Diego County, nicknamed the avocado capital of the world. In 1982, my parents moved to Fallbrook from San Clemente with their 3 children crammed into the back seat of a blue Dodge van. Like thousands of others fleeing the coastal cities, they sought a slower, more agricultural lifestyle for themselves and their offspring. They built a house on a hill overlooking an avocado groves that stretched for miles in every direction. For years, my sister and I would walk through those groves to our bus stop, wading through leaf mulch that crackled noisily in our wake. The old trees towered over us, their thick branches reaching up into the ground like gnarled gray hands, blotting out the sun to form dusky sanctuaries. Occasionally, the crash of a fat avocado onto the dry mulch bed would jolt us from our morning reveries. For my siblings and me, avocados were the constant companions of an idyllic childhood. I remember avocado throwing contests with friends, avocado festivals, you have one here in this county, ancient packing houses, migrant workers thrusting picking poles into canopies. As a teenager, I would sell fruit out of my car in the nearby desert communities. Our 2 grandfathers worked together to build a treehouse overlooking the chicken run. One year, our Labrador retriever consumed so many fallen avocados that we had to send her to friends in the city before she ate herself to death. But her coat was beautiful. Between 1970 and 1984, California saw an explosion in avocado plantings. It was the third great explosion, I guess you could say, the third great phase of avocado plantings in the state, and the last one so far, both in the northern subdistricts of San Diego and in Ventura and Santa Barbara counties. In 1974, there were 20,000 bearing avocado groves in the state. By 1984, that number had skyrocketed to 72,000. Crop production went from 100 million pounds in the mid-70s to an average of 350 million pounds in the 80s. Acreage in the state finally peaked at 76,000 in 1987. It's roughly 50,000 today. And then it began a slow decline. My parents' timing as hobbyist farmers was unfortunate. This 1970s avocado boom led to a massive crop in 1987 and a historic bust in prices. Anyone who's been involved in agriculture knows that that is the norm, not the accidental. There's always a boom and bust. Subsequent years would bring droughts, disease, fire, development, and rising water costs, especially in San Diego. After regrafting our trees to a new variety called Hass, my parents decided that they had had enough. And in 1994, I was working on the East Coast when they called to tell me they were moving to town. But a single thread of passion and perseverance connects the men and women of California who have spent their lives growing, selling, and studying the avocado. The industry has survived more than a century of the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Through it all, growers, packers, nurserymen, pickers, retailers, marketers, obsessives, and researchers continue to devote themselves to a fruit that gives the world so much joy. So today, most of the groves in Fallbrook are gone now. Many of them have migrated up to Santa Barbara and Ventura County, thankfully, as are many of the legendary plantings around my town. Total acreage in the state is roughly half of what it was in the 80s. But my book is not the history of a once great industry fading into irrelevance. It really isn't. To paraphrase Alfred Lord Tennyson, though much is taken, much abides. California is and always will be Avocado Land. So, just to give you an idea of what is in my little book here, this is a quick table of contents. I just want to go through that quickly, but you can kind of read it. I go through it chronologically. I spend a little more time at the beginning because a lot happened in those early years. But we've got the avocados before California, so I go through the origin in Central America and in Mexico, which is fascinating. Then how they came to America, the birth of the industry in Los Angeles in 1915, and then the marketing. This was in the golden age of marketing, Mad Men era. That's when avocados were really created by Californians. And that set the tone for not just the rest of the United States, but the entire world. And that's a theme in my book, is that California, in a real sense, invented the avocado. I mean, it came from Mexico. Thank you, Mexico. But we sold it. And we didn't just sell it to ourselves. We sold it to the United States. We sold it back to Mexico in terms of all that technology and training. And then our researchers, our packers, and all those people went to places like Israel and Africa and Indonesia and the Philippines and Israel and helped them start their industries. So in a real sense, we Californians, like we often do, kind of decided that since we like it, darn it, the whole rest of the world should like it too. So we have got avocados go mainstream. That's sort of the story of the 1960s, 1980, when the war on fat came on, and all of a sudden avocados were under fire for being this poisonous food for your diet. We had to combat that, and I think we did very well. Then there was the avocado revolution that starts in 2000. What else happened in 97, 98, 2000? NAFTA. So that was the entrance of Mexican avocados. That occupies a big part of my book. And then I talk about the future of avocados, California avocados. So I went down to, I talked to 35, 40 avocado VIPs. Some of them I'll talk about today in Santa Barbara, Ventura, lots of them in San Diego, California, and all over the state. And unfortunately, Well, fortunately, they're alive. And most of the book is history. So that was a little problem for me because I could only quote so many people who were not alive in these chapters. So I put them at the end, and they talk about a variety of topics that have been important and are important. So I made sure to include some really important people in the industry because I was amazed that no one had written a book on the California avocado industry. Shame on us. But thank goodness the archives were all there and all this great information. And I went into it with fear and trembling because like any big industry, multi-billion-dollar industry, there's a lot of politics. And this side hates this side. And there's a lot of growers hate the packers. I exaggerate. But so I didn't hate anyone. So I had to go in and make sure that this person knew that I was talking to this person. And little by little, I built a pyramid, a reverse pyramid, I guess, of people. And it turns out everybody was extremely supportive and helpful, and the book has had a very good feedback. Finally, Appendix 2:1, how to grow an avocado tree, and then places, products, and events. Now, most of the photos you'll see up there, I collected at the Huntington Museum, where there's a very large archive there, thanks to the Avocado Society. Let's talk about avocados before California. Before I do that, though, let me give you some of the topics that are in the book, which I find some of them delightful. It's a delightful history, really. There are certain industries where the right person seemed to have been put in place at exactly the right time, and when that person retires or dies, somebody is right there to pick up the baton and carry it on. So there were about 5 or 6 people just like that in this book, and so it creates this wonderful narrative that has really made this a blessed industry. So here are some of the topics. The origins and evolution of the avocado tree, controlling competition. We had to keep Florida out, and then we had to keep Mexico out. We did it. Yeah, we did that. Discovery and rise of Fuerte, founding of the California Avocado Society, how avocados get to your store. Something I never thought about before. It's a fascinating process. Historically important recipes, I'll share some of those at the end. Someone just told me that man with the mysterious avocado told me that he has tried one of the recipes, pink grapefruit and avocado salad. Has anybody made that before? It's a historically very well-known recipe, but my mom used to make that for me growing up, so I included that in the book. The rise of Calavo, which was the first grower exchange. The personalities of the 3 districts. There are 3 main avocado districts. The Southern District, which is San Diego County. The Central Districts, Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Orange County, and then the Northern Districts, San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara, and Ventura. And those have all changed, but they have distinct personalities. The importance of Mexican immigration to the U.S., the rise of the California Avocado Commission, which was our marketing, combating the war on fat, the story of guacamole, fascinating. Never knew anything. I liked guacamole, but I didn't know anything about it. The avocado gold rush of the 70s and 80s, the arrival of Mexican avocados, rising costs of water, which have decimated the San Diego County avocado industry, the pre-ripening revolution. I don't know if you knew this, but the vast majority of avocados you see in your store have been pre-ripened in a facility, just like our bananas, so that when they hit room temperature, they go from hard to soft in 3 days. If you know anything about avocados in nature, they go from hard to soft in about 2 weeks. Takes forever, or a week maybe, but grove management companies, rise of nutrition studies from 1980 to 2000 and beyond, and how to grow an avocado. All right. Let's stop right there for a second. Wow, I've already talked for 15 minutes practically, and then that's the intro. Anybody have a question at this point? Or do you want to hold your...
What replaced the avocado grows in Fallbrook?
Ooh, well, that is an active process. I'll tell you a little bit that what I don't want to see California become is what Hawaii has become, which is they used to grow pineapple, they used to grow sugarcane, and as somebody told me, now they grow golf courses. California is doing that a little bit too, but we are aware of our heritage and we want to preserve it as best we can. You've done a better job of that in Ventura and Santa Barbara. In California, we're doing a crop swap. Anybody heard of a crop swap? So they'll go to somebody with avocados and say, those avocados use a lot of water, your water bill is through the roof, we will pay you $20,000 to replace your 5 acres of avocados with grapes. So we're getting lots of grapes. But mostly what we're doing is getting lots of empty fields and planting homes in their place. Yes? Agave.
Some cousins of mine got tired of the fluctuation in the market and now have agaves.
Yeah.
Much better market with that tequila.
I see agaves all over Fallbrook. Well, we'll get back to those questions. That's fascinating. Yes?
Did the Padres grow avocados in Mission?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. Okay, let's just get to that. As one of my questions in this first slide here is, I just did a book on grapes, and I did a history of the missionaries, and they brought grapes. They brought one grape, right? The mission grape. Terrible grape. Listan Prieto, but it makes a good sweet wine. Anyway, they did not bring avocados at all. Avocados cannot be found in any of the missions. It took 300 years for the avocado to get to California after the Spanish first arrived. And that is a torturous experience as far as how that avocado went through the islands. The Spanish discovered it and loved it. Let me give you the first description of an avocado by somebody named Oviedo, who is Hernan Cortez's, one of his scientists. He saw some avocados and tasted them in Nicaragua in the early 1500s. On the mainland are certain trees that are called pear trees, perales. They are not pear trees like those of Spain, but are held in no less esteem. Rather does this fruit have many advantages over the pears of that country. There are certain large trees with long, narrow leaves similar to the laurel, but larger and greener. This tree produces certain pears, many of which weigh more than a pound and some less, and the color and shape are of true pears, and the skin is somewhat thicker but softer, and in the middle it holds a seed like a peeled chestnut. It's so hard to describe this because it's unlike any fruit they've ever seen. And between it and the primary skin is that which is eaten, which is something of a liquid or a paste that is very similar to butter and a very good food and of good flavor. They are wild trees, for the chief gardener is God, and the Indians apply no work whatever. That wasn't true. They did apply some work, but they weren't reproducing it through grafting. Grafting didn't come along until the mid-1800s. Amusingly, Oviedo wrote that, quote, after avocados are collected, they mature and become in perfect condition to be eaten, but they spoil if they are left and allowed to pass that time. So I thought that observation was perfect for the short half-life we've seen with avocados, where I've got a 2-hour date with my avocado tonight, and nobody's going to get in the middle of it. The Spanish perhaps did not bring avocados because avocados early on, thanks to the Spanish, developed a reputation as an aphrodisiac. So there were stories of Native Americans locking up their maidens in the huts and everything in Central America and Mexico. We're talking about Incans and Aztecs and Mayans, lest they be ravished by the young men as they go out for the avocado harvest. I'm not sure how much of that is true, but it still remained a stereotype of avocados that they somehow, maybe because they're oily and delicious, that they're somehow, have sexual properties. In fact, if you read any article about the avocado, inevitably the author describes how the avocado, aguacatl, in Nahuatl, the Aztec language, means, anybody know? Yes, testicles. Right. You hear that in every article. And so therefore, aguacatl mole means testicle sauce. Spoiler alert, it does not mean that. So more kind of sober minds looked at the linguistics of it, and turns out aguajatl means avocado, which is a euphemism the way nuts are a euphemism for us for the male gonad. So it doesn't mean testicle, it's just kind of a slang term, I suppose. You got real avocados, I guess, or whatever. So if you read that the next time in an article, please disregard it. So it's interesting, the English, when they first reported it in that 1672 treatise there by William Dampier, talked about how the Spanish love these avocados because it gets them worked up sexually. So the English were passing along that pejorative stereotype. But maybe the Spanish thought the same thing and didn't bring it up for that reason. Who knows? So they came to America around in the 1700s through Florida. Different stories of how they got to Florida, but chances are they were planted there by indigenous people, probably as early as the 1600s. There are three horticultural races of avocados. There's something called the Guatemalan race, the Mexican race, and then there's the West Indian race. These all come from Central America, but the West Indian got its name because it really became popular in the West Indies because it can grow in hot, humid areas with saline soil. The other two can't. So most of the Florida avocados, who's had a Florida avocado here? No, I was going to say. Did you? There's an alligator pear, right. So they can grow that inferior West Indian avocado, big avocados that look beautiful. You cut them open, they're watery. So in 1850, what I love about avocados is they really grew up with California. The first avocados reportedly in California, in Santa Barbara, California, by Judge Robert Ord. And I went down to Barbareño's restaurant at Emily's, what's it called, Brasileño? Barbareño's restaurant, which was allegedly the site of Robert Ord's house and this old avocado that lasted well into the 1900s before it died. And John Ord is credited with being the first. He planted 3 trees, and those seedlings were then planted in Montecito by other people. And the first grove was in Montecito, supposedly. We don't really know because they didn't last beyond the 1900s. There's also stories of them being grown for the first time in Azusa, California. We know they were all over Los Angeles. And of course, you can still see, and I'll talk about it, you can see that large tree on the far left corner of that slide. That is on the Huntington Botanical Garden campus. Henry Huntington fell in love with avocados at the Jonathan Club in downtown LA in 1906. He got seeds from the chef and planted the first commercial grove on his estate in 1906-07. And about 7 of those trees are still there. They look like Amazon rainforest trees. So beautiful, and that's a researcher at the base there. So they came to America. They were planted in Santa Barbara, but soon enough, a little cool up here, and there was another fruit growing up here that was much more popular. Citrus, lemon and oranges. And so these immediately went to the central region, where all the people were in Los Angeles. And Los Angeles became the home of avocados. What happened, though, is because of this proclivity of people to just, this magic of being able to throw a seed in the ground and have it come up a totally different avocado, and you can name it after your wife or whatever. Suddenly, even in 1915 at the first meeting, there were already 86 varieties of avocados. That was a problem. And it became a problem. And so I talk about the battle of varieties in this book, because now we are all used to one variety of avocado. But back then, even up until the 50s and 60s, there might be 3 or 4 avocados out there. So they needed to find a good avocado. And so right now my mind is on the fires because West India Gardens was one of the most famous nurseries to come out of California. And as we know, Altadena is on fire. But West India Gardens and Wilson Popenoe were the first to propagate in a big way the magic avocado, Fuerte. So they went down, they found it in Axlisco, Mexico, these fruit explorers, which is an adventure in itself. Wilson Popenoe did it himself as well in Guatemala and elsewhere, brought back the avocado, and it was the only avocado, the only seedling to survive the big freeze of 1913. All the other avocados died, and so they named it Fuerte. At least that's one story. And a pig farmer named J.T. Whedon said, fine, my other ones are dead, I'll take these little seedlings, went home, planted them, and they were prolific, they tasted great, and the Popenoes knew they had something. These avocados, some of them were getting $1 a piece in restaurants in San Francisco and LA in 1920. So as you can imagine, this gave people all sorts of dreams about living the easy life, and that became an issue. So this is the earliest newspaper article. That man is Juan Murrieta, who gave his name to the city of Murrieta. He was a sheriff from Spain originally, and living in downtown Murrieta, downtown Los Angeles, and he mentions 200 avocados there sold for $135 in the market. That set off a lot of speculators. And so all of a sudden, people were planting. So I want to talk a little bit about some Santa Barbara avocado VIPs. You might have heard some of these people. Scott Vanderkar, a wonderful person, a grove manager, has his own family farm as well. He's in Carpinteria. Rick Shade. Rick Shade is, I believe, also in Carpinteria. He is one of the most important people still alive in the avocado business. He's been the president of the California Avocado Commission. He's served on every level of leadership. And of course, Duncan and Robert Abbott, they have a very large farm, I think near the Goleta Valley. One of the stories in my book that I tell is the transition from San Diego County, which is really where avocados took off in 1940 and blew up until 1980, and the transition from there to the northern counties. So now, well, let me stop right there. But 60% of California's avocados now are grown in Santa Barbara County and Ventura County and San Luis Obispo. 60%. At one time, closer to 80% were grown in San Diego County. So that has been a long transition, but these counties have reaped the benefits and will continue to reap the benefits. There is a lot of optimism on the continued growth in the northern counties, so that's exciting. Let's move on from here. In Camarillo, those two men in the middle, one is a guy named Bob Berg, and the other is a person named John Lamb. Right, so John Lamb is a huge figure in this area. He invented, Lamb Hass, if you've heard of that type of avocado, that's named after him, but he did so much more. His farm there in Camarillo gave birth to all the new avocados that you might be hearing about today. Gem comes from there. Lamb Hass, oh my gosh. See what happens. Carmen and Gwen, because early on we realized there were problems with the Fuerte avocado. They bore well, but they were very alternate bearing. So every other year they'd have a very low harvest, which is the nature of avocados, but more so for Fuerte. They were very thin-skinned, so they didn't ship as well as we'd like. And so little by little, this avocado that ruled California for 40 years started to give way to the to the Hass avocado. But people had been trained to want an avocado that looks like the one that's being passed around, a beautiful green alligator pear, right? And the Hass is an ugly little warty black avocado. And people said, that'll never sell. And so Bob Berg and the UC Riverside breeding program went to work trying to find a Hass-like avocado with high oil and a thick skin, but that would stay green. And he did it, but it was too late. Because by then, we'd all learned to love the Hass, and the avocado industry had taught everybody to love the Hass. And so now we have these delightful avocados that were kind of obsolete. So here's some more great people. Steve Barnard owns the largest avocado producer perhaps in the entire world, and he's in Oxnard. He's an Oxnard boy. Rob Brokaw, wonderful person, owns the largest avocado breeding facility in the world. Very famous for developing clonal root stocks, the kind that got us over root rot, because root rot almost took out the whole industry. And we went to work and figured out, well, if you use the rootstock of this particular avocado and graft the good avocado on top of it, you can weather that root rot issue a lot better. And also don't plant in soil that doesn't drain very well. Plant on hillsides. Mound up your stuff. So let's get through a little bit more. I love this. I use this quote at the beginning of my book, and I think some of you might be able to relate to it, whether you have planted plants or planted children. I love this quote. These trees he plants, and in whose shade he shall never sit, he loves for themselves and for his children and for his children's children, over whom their branches will extend. I just love that. These people that I've spoken to in the avocado industry, they don't do it for the money. There are so many easier ways to make money. And they do it because they believe in the plant, and they believe in the soil, and they believe in doing something bigger themselves and leaving the world a better place after. All right, let's go for 5 more minutes, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. Let's see, press that button. Come on, baby. All right. We got a little delay here. I'm getting the rainbow wheel of death.
The computer is telling you your time is up.
I bet, I know. So here's a lot of the way the avocado industry was spread in the early days was through real estate speculators. So that person, Edward Hart, he was the first president of the California Avocado Association, later named the Avocado Society. And that's his advertisement there, the finest avocado land. Some of the advertisements were, all you need is 1 acre and you've got an income for life. Now you need 40 acres, who knows. And you can see some of the neat varietals in there. John Coit is considered the father of the avocado industry. Oh yes, maybe it is warning me that I've spoken too long. We're only at 1925, people. Cancel your evening meal. Well, okay. So here's early advertisement for the black gem. That was Hass' early, kind of the early nickname, the black gem. That didn't quite take off. There's the mother tree in La Habra Heights. That is where all the Hass trees in the whole world came from. It's ironic that we went to Mexico and got the Fuerte, and the people in the industry would do pilgrimages back to the spot in Mexico where it came from, honoring the owner. And even up until 1948, they did that. And in those same journals, you see a little mention of the Hass, how it's gaining in popularity. And so by the time, so you could see the beautiful Fuerte on the left, or the green, and that's Rudy Hass, the postman, who developed by accident the Hass avocado. Any questions? Well, in fact, let's just open it up for questions, and every now and then maybe I'll scroll through and do another one. Yes?
So I was just curious how susceptible avocados are to frost, whether the frost has to be a certain length of time, and if it happens when they're flowering, or how frost affects.
Right. All those things. The avocados, they always like to say, like to live where people like to live. There's a very small portion of the Earth's surface where avocados can live. And you'll notice that avocados usually are on hilltops. That is to get them off the ground floor and to protect them from frost, because they are very sensitive to frost. It'll kill the plant, it'll kill budding fruit, it'll kill flowers, and if it's sustained for 3 or 4 days, as it was in 1913, and in several other years since then, it will kill the plant itself. So that's why you will see avocados on hillsides. But they're also there because they were the second plant to come. They were the second tree. The citrus were all on the bottom, and citrus are a little hardier. They can have a little more saline water. Avocados need the best water. They need the best views. They need a little bit of wind. They need they're very finicky fruits. And so the answer is you can't take much frost, which is why they can't be grown in San Joaquin Valley so far. But again, maybe they're experimenting with certain types of avocados that might be a little hardier. Fuerte is a little hardier than Hass to cold temperatures. Certain rootstocks are hardier. This just changes on its own. You want to go to this one? In the 60s, they started to market the avocado with tie-ins, with things like chips and almond and wine and sunglasses and about 80 other products. They discovered this tie-in advertising, which was kind of has become sort of illegal. Oh, to be, good grief. Okay, well, I know whoever's controlling this is clearly impatient with me. So, Avocado Land becomes Avocado World. Let's talk briefly, because I know you might be interested in it. In 1999, if you were having an avocado in Santa Barbara or San Diego or Los Angeles or Chicago, there was a 95% chance that avocado was from California. 10 years later, there was a 7% chance it was from California. So there was a radical shift when NAFTA happened. And it didn't happen all at once, but in 1997, when the floodgates began to open, the avocado farmers in California said, look, this is going to kill our industry. Start off in the Midwest and only start off for a certain window during the year. Because Mexico had been growing avocados. Even though it had been eating its own avocados, it had been starting to sell, with the help of California packers, to China or to Japan and other places. But they said, we want part of this NAFTA thing. So they started selling in little numbers. This really shows the story. So in 1980, that far left bar, the green bar, shows about 500 million pounds of avocados, all California avocados. Californians were eating, that far right, 2 pounds per person per capita. If you were in California, you were eating more. If you were in Poughkeepsie, you were probably eating nothing because you weren't getting avocados. Now look what happens. By the middle of that graph, 97, you start to see the yellow come in. That's Mexico. And then eventually in 2007, Mexico said, okay, enough of this throttling of our supply. We have hundreds of thousands of acres down here. We want in. And so USDA said, fine, come in, but use our packers. That was key. They use our packers. And now look at the demand start shooting up till where it is in 2018. It's at 8 pounds per person. And look at the percentage now of California avocados, 7%. But isn't that interesting? It didn't ruin the avocado industry. It spiked it. It was the revolution. So there are 3 aspects of the avocado revolution, as I call it. 1 is Mexico's avocados. 2, with all that money coming in from Mexico, California rightly said, look, we have been marketing this. We created the market. Pay us. Pay your fair share. And so they started taking a percentage from different associations, but the Haas Avocado Board said, look, we're going to take I don't know, 5 cents for every pound. And we're going to give your marketing associations in your country back the money, 85%. And we're going to keep 15% and we're going to do nutrition studies. So in 2010, there had been maybe 10 nutrition studies done. Today, there have been 50 nutrition studies. So all of a sudden, avocados went from, okay, we get it, they don't have cholesterol, they're not too bad for you, to they're a superfood and we need to eat as much as we can. And that is an ongoing process. Then the pre-ripening revolution, which is I discuss in my book. The way you do with pre-ripening, it was invented in the mid-'80s. You take avocados, you pick them, you bring them down to, you cool them down to 60 degrees, and you pump ethylene gas through them, venting them for about 24 hours, and then you ship them in refrigerated cars to the stores. And then in a process that a scientist would appreciate, but that I think is miraculous, when they come to room temperature, they're ready to eat in 3 days. So that, all of a sudden, because what's our biggest complaint? You go to the store and these hard avocados and you're like, well, I can't eat you. I don't want you. So it increased sales by 25 times. And then and then the Mexico coming in. So that's it. So questions now. Now, yes.
Well, kind of two parts. It started out with just because your chart runs in 2018.
Yes.
And there was just an
Oh.
article, a few months ago, I think it was the LA Times, talking about now, in 2024, the consumption of avocados in the U.S. was like over 80% supplied by Mexico. And maybe that's...
It's more like 90% from Mexico.
Weren't they having some sort of a light or something down there that was...
Well, let's go to the final slide. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
That way you just said. My other question actually is, so when you're in the grocery store and if you see organic avocados
Yes.
versus other, have those organic avocados been shot through with the ethylene?
Oh,
Is that still considered organic if they've been treated to that?
okay. The short answer is I don't know. But ethylene is a naturally produced chemical by an avocado. That's how they get ripe, is they naturally produce ethylene. All the growers are doing is juicing that up a little bit. So it doesn't cause any harm, but I don't know if organic, I think so. Yeah, I think they get pre-ripened. Yeah.
Is it a wives' tale, or is it true that if you put avocados in a bag with an apple, that it'll ripen faster?
It is true. It is true. But what's even better is just putting it with bananas and grouping it with other fruit, because then they're all producing ethylene together. So an avocado by itself is going to ripen much more slowly than grouped together. And if you group them together in a bag, yeah, it kind of traps the gas.
It's
And
not an apple per se, it's just a...
yeah.
And leaving the stem on.
Yeah, so this slide is interesting, and leaving the stem is important, but it's not vital. Everybody's worried about tariffs right now. We've heard the T word again. And of course, narco avocados, blood avocados. That has become a big subject. A little while ago, do you remember that story? They cut off avocados completely in Mexico because somebody had threatened a USD inspector down there. And all of a sudden we heard, no more avocados from Mexico. Well, that's always a possibility, because we know that, unfortunately, the fruit industry in general from Mexico is rife with, with narcos. And they're very involved down there. Not all of it, but some of it. Oh, no. Fine. I get it. I get it. But please, let me answer some questions.
I think we're going to take any questions for Rob outside, where he'll be signing his book that you can purchase. If you're a member, you get a 10% discount, so come say hi to me or Abby. We'll be happy to check you out. We'll pour more wine, and maybe there's some leftover guacamole that we can have too. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.